Rodinnbrok. It's a nation of drunkards and druids with possibly one of the most dysfunctional governments of any civilization, real or fake. So, how has a group as unorthodox as this managed to carve out a niche in a landscape such as Eldham, surviving thousands of years? To most people, Rodinnbrok is a nation purely dedicated to the imbibement of alcohol, but in today's video lecture, I'll be going through their extensive history of early monarchs, their recent rise to prominence, and never-before-seen Rodinian cultural practices only known to the reclusive drunkards of Rodinnbrok. From the beginning of time, up until a few millennia ago, the land now known as Rodinnbrok was inhabited by nomadic tribal peoples and bands roaming monsters. Among these tribes, a seafaring people, thought to have a common ancestor with distant Valdic tribes, emerged as an early city in the Gulf of Runia. This tribe produced a warrior, known to many as the Great Father, who fostered 2 children with the humanoid races of the upper Rodinnbrok wilderness. His first son, descended from the giantesses of the mountains, possessed extraordinary strength, and was hailed as a great hero in his time. His second son, born from the changeling of the forests, lacked the supernatural strength of his brother, instead making his fortune as a prolific trader, and possessed the changeling trait to embody the physical characteristics of another. These 2 brothers would lead their clan under the banner of Runia, spreading their influence throughout the area until a falling out would lead them and their followers to split off and create 2 distinct tribes. The firstborn son went north, slaying an ice dragon and founding the Kingdom of Rhine, which later became known as Zon, home to the Tiganese people that followed him. The second-born son, and his tribe of the Rodenfurster, opted to roam the Great Plains of Rodinnbrok for 10 years before eventually being pushed farther south during a great famine. While exploring inside a marshland, they became trapped in a vicious snowstorm, seeking shelter in a ruined castle left behind from an ancient civilization. Their leader, Roba the Red, declared this land, which had saved him and his tribe, the town of Dreregard. Roba's descendant, King Lycan, united the now large population of the Rodenfurster under the banner of the Kingdom of Rodinnbrok, meaning the Bleeding Pants to honor his ancestor, the late King Roba the Red. By this time, Rodinnbrok had come to control a sizable portion of land stretching to the northern city of Arhalovia down to the southern farming town of Gefjavik, its capital residing in the now rebuilt ruins of Dreregard, which had come to be a bustling metropolis of its time. During his rule, King Lycan established Rodinian oligarchy, organized the Jarls into one body, and began a slew of public work projects to grow his fledgling nation. Upon his death, Lycan was remembered as a great unifier and is considered as the first true High Jarl of Rodinnbrok. However, the modern Bacchanalian culture synonymous with Rodinnbrok wouldn't come till much later, during the rule of King Eero, later known as King Eero the Lustful. But before we can explain his rule, you need to understand the history of Yorm, the world-eating worm, and the Three Pleasures Church, the national religion of Rodinnbrok. In ancient times, Yorm, in his tireless journey to consume the world, albeit very slowly, accidentally consumed a small town. Because Yorm moved so slowly, the town and all its buildings were spared. Surprisingly, the ancient town survived and grew to flourish in the mouth of Yorm. This is historically attributed to the unique chemical structure of its saliva, which stimulates the growth of plants and is alleged to greatly increase libido. The townspeople decided to remain in the town, despite the dangerous environment. Yorm eventually submerged into the earth, and the culture of the town flourished, undisturbed for centuries. During the reign of Eero, Yorm re-emerged from the depths, with the now ancient town, renamed to Yormund by its inhabitants. The culture of the men who lived in Yorm was intensely hedonistic, placing great value in earthly pleasures. When Eero discovered the people of Yormund, they showed great hospitality, looking for a way to submit his legacy, and an excuse to set up brothels and bars around Rodinnbrok. Eero decided to spread Yormund's religion, pleasurism, worshipping the pleasures of the spiritual worship of Yorm around his nation. It is still unknown whether Yorm is a god, a celestial creature, or just a magnificent beast. However, this has little importance to the people of Rodinnbrok, who regard Yorm as a protector that deserves gratitude rather than a deity. Eero's reign is marked by the acceleration of the modern party culture of Rodinnbrok and the construction of Granhallen, the Grand Mead Hall of Rodinnbrok, which acts as a veritable temple to the pleasures teachings, but also as a festival hall and meeting place for the Rodinian people. In a forgotten year, not too long ago, a succession crisis was occurring, throwing the nation of Rodinnbrok into turmoil. With the passing of the throne, following the death of the previous king, Spliff Roden, eldest son of the Roden dynasty and leader of the Berserkers, was set to inherit the throne. However, after a series of military debacles, he was ousted, and his youngest sister, Nausicaa, would lead the country in his place. As she would come to be known, Nausicaa the Fair was never groomed to take the throne, and largely relied on her advisors, while she attended to other matters around the Commonwealth. With the Rodinian military in disarray after the ousting of her brother, she founded and led the Valkyria, a mainstay of the Rodinian peacekeeping force, which still resides in Dreregard to this day. Outside of fighting, Nausicaa spent her time traveling Eldham, establishing relations and friendships with different nobles. Those friendships would lead to the birth of her first son, Sandy Roven, born of Carolian heritage from a Rathenian royal house, and her daughter, Wephisteria Roven, whose parentage is still unknown. Shortly after the birth of her two known children, Nausicaa would sadly pass away while bravely defending a group of Rodinian adventurers. During this transitional period, a group of settlers from the northeast, known as the Elysian Empire, successfully conquered northern Rodinnbrok, pushing the Rodinians back to the capital of Dreregard. Sandy Roven, now 31, would take the throne, promising to reclaim the lost territories.
At the time of Sandy's ascension to the throne, Rodinnbrok had been reduced to the territories of Dreregard, Gefjavik, and Astropia. Rodinnbrok decided to work with its surrounding neighbors towards the common goal of banishing the Elysians, and thus assembled the Northern Leifmer Alliance, composed most notably of Sodalis, Tyrrhenia, Mercury, and Nova Zemlya. The Northern Leifmer Alliance, also known as the NLA, joined the Second Coalition, a larger anti-imperialist faction who recognized the threat of the Elysians and vowed to defeat them. Before the first battle, Rodinnbrok would negotiate the defection and surrender of the city of Valois, moving the line forward and reclaiming territory, weakening the Elysian Empire. The following siege of the Elysian capital, Atta, would have no resistance, causing the collapse of the Elysian state and leading to a partition agreement which would eventually return the far northern city of Argilovia to Rodinnbrok. Many prominent citizens would begin to establish themselves during this time, including Gelid, who had greatly aided in the growth of Argilovia, Oman Mustaba, Jarl and Sultan of Tariq, and Swirls, a notable merchant who emigrated to Rodinnbrok, bringing wealth to the developing administration. Around this time, the High Princess Werif would be courted by the now Jarl of Mattis, Chero, leading to a land deal granting Rodinnbrok territory in the land known as Nova Zemlya. Additionally, Rodinnbrok convinced a goblin tribe known as Urak, which would later come to be known as Uraka, yes, you heard that right, the Uraka, and assimilate under their banner. This time of peace would be interrupted by a group of Elysian reformationists called the Majestians, who attempted to pose as foreigners immigrating to Rodinnbrok in order to set up a coup. Their presence led to an extremely drawn-out and uneventful conflict that ended in their surrender and exile from Rodinnbrok. Notably, their leader Otto would go on to lead the Empire of Aristios. Exhausted from the conflict and looking for new trade allies, Sandy would follow in the footsteps of his mother Nausicaa and adventure to the far west, placing the Jarl of Dunwall, Zul Manel, in charge of the Commonwealth during his absence. Sensing opportunity within this instability, a group led by Benet and Pango would set up puppet cities in preparation for a coup during Sandy's absence. By the time he returned, roughly one-third of the Rodinian landmass had been claimed by the rebel group, but once again, Rodinnbrok squashed the rebels without conflict. However, this time, it would lead to the Sandweaver city of Azrilis becoming a pillar of Rodinian life in the north. By this time, Princess Werif was becoming an important figure in her own right, and started to attract the attention of many foreigners, including the High Priest of Rokia, Zin, who believed her to be the Jokai, a chosen figure who would lead his nation of Rokia into an age of great prosperity. After a long discussion, she agreed to his proposition, and henceforth became the god-appointed Empress of Rokia. Her first action being to promote the priest who discovered her to the Shogun of Rokia before merging the state into Rodinnbrok. Under leadership with the help of Sandy, the once abandoned nation became full of life, and to this day hosts the largest city in all of Rodinnbrok. Amamachi, the capital of Rokia, is a bustling fishing town famous for its sloped blue roofs while also serving as the headquarters for the Taisho Honor Guard, one of the 3 major covenants within Rodinnbrok. While all of this is sort of off topic, Rokia has a wonderful culture and is definitely worth traveling to for anyone planning to visit the nation of drunkards. Sandy came to have a vision that the god of parties, Fang Chwonki, would descend onto the most righteous party in all of Eldom and deliver upon the people gifts of alcohol and revelry. Rodinnbrok, long priding itself on being the party capital of Eldom, spared no expense to prepare a feast fit for the gods. The party would rage for 7 days and 7 nights, in which almost 30 double chests of golden mead were consumed, before finally Fang Chwonki would gift the land of Rodinnbrok the rivers of wine and mead, magical streams that would perpetually flow with alcohol for the drunkards of Rodinnbrok. Fang Chwonki is still revered as a god by the pleasure sect of alcoholism, and a statue of his likeness residing in Dreiregard is rumored to grant lovers of drunkenness bottles of rare spiced alcohol called Pyment. However, recently, what Rodinnbrok is most known for is being the primary defender in the Mad King's War against the northeast of Eldom. Neo, Imperator of Uraka, declared war on Rodinnbrok, a long-standing ally of Uraka. Weeks of tensions would go by as many states would crumble simply to the threat of potential annexation. Neo would eventually be healed, quote-unquote, but the damage had already been done. The instability caused by the Mad King's War and the proxy wars that followed would take months for Rodinnbrok to recover from, and cause the dissolution of Rodinnbrok's sister state, the Cog, whose destruction is still mourned in Eldom to this day.
As with any major country, Rodinnbrok, from an outward perspective, operates relatively normally. However, internally, the country is far from it. The Rodinian government is a representative oligarchy/monarchy, with the monarch acting as a failsafe to prevent a rogue government and lead in times of crisis. The Rodinian oligarchy is composed of the Rothgava, or ministers, the Jarls, and finally, the Rodari, who act as the citizen representatives within the High Council. Here's where things get confusing. The Rothgava can be appointed or elected. However, after 2 weeks of their tenure, they are allowed to be challenged to an appropriate contest, such as a debate or a duel by any citizen, in which, if the citizen succeeds, they assume this extremely important role within the government. Additionally, Rodinians reject medicine and believe alcohol to be a cure-all, which is the cause of the Ministry of Health's role as a glorified brewery and alcohol distribution service. Furthermore, the Rodinian legal system, invented by King Aero, derives its laws from the Tree of Scrolls. Any acting Rodinian royalty may scroll upon this holy tree. Royal decrees which include, but are not limited to, putting a brothel in every Rodinian church and the banning of all children by Queen Nausicaa. Did I forget to mention that the Rodinnbrok national weapon is the lute, wielded by the drunken berserkers in their pursuit of bloody and musical battle. The nation is dotted with many beautiful cities such as Dunwall, with Victorian architecture, and much of the aristocracy built around the whaling industry. And Astropia, a scenic city southeast of Dreiregard, which practices astropology concerning the worship of planets. The Sandweaver subculture of Rodinnbrok hosts 3 major cities, these being Tariq, a sultanate famous for its fishing trade, Azraelis, a bastion to the north, which provides some of the finest horses in Eldham, and Thulgund, a desolate wasteland famous for its volcanoes and towering black stone fortress. Rodinian culture can be marked by the consumption of rodden bread, the historic wearing of red pants, but most importantly, Rodinian culture can always be distinguished by one thing and one thing alone: alcoholism. To this day, the scent of mead and chants of revelry called to the drunkards of Eldham, perpetuating an oddity like Rodinnbrok as a hallmark of the server, hopefully for a very long time to come.